Now welcome to another lightning response video, where this time the question comes to us from a Skull Doodle who asked, "Hey Thor, why do you enjoy Andor so much? It was good, but it was far from amazing. I think that the fact it was mostly filmed on location rather than using stagecraft makes it feel completely out of place compared to the rest of the shows. The plot, script was nothing special. It did not feel like proper Star Wars. That is why hardly anyone watched it." Okay, so respectfully, I gotta start out here by disagreeing about Andor's plot and script being nothing special, because in my opinion it's probably the best written mainstream Star Wars story since The Empire Strikes Back. And I say mainstream because there have been some books over the years, with the Plagueis novel immediately jumping to mind, that have also been brilliantly written, and I don't just mean in terms of how enjoyable they ended up being. A lot of Star Wars is enjoyable if not written brilliantly, but instead I mean just how well crafted the stories were. And Andor, even if you want to call it slow and boring as some do, which is fine, I know it's not for everyone, and I'm not mad if people don't like it, to each their own. But in my opinion, it's an extremely well-crafted story that rewards your patience in the end. It hooks you just enough at the start and keeps you interested before things really start to ramp up, and they continue to ramp up until we get these huge and very worthwhile emotional payoffs at the end, and they are almost entirely brought about by the characters themselves. It's almost completely character-driven, and it builds layer upon layer of intrigue through their actions, not necessarily all the things going on around them. It uses many different threads to weave a beautifully intricate tapestry of suspense, rather than being more plot-driven, rather than following a very linear beat-by-beat or step-by-step path to an ending that is kind of easy to see, or finding a map that literally points in a certain direction for the characters to go in, so that they can find the thing to stop the bad guy from doing evil stuff. And I really just think if Star Wars is going to not only continue or kind of keep surviving, but if it's going to thrive once again, we have to try some new and different things from time to time. You have to keep things fresh. And I don't mean always. You can absolutely do plenty more of the classic style Star Wars stories with all the hallmarks it's famous for, like lightsabers, big space battles, and so on. I love all that stuff. I love a simple yet well-done tale of good versus evil. In fact, I think in recent years we've lost more classic-style storytelling in favor of implying that there are only infinite shades of gray, which, yeah, is essentially true in real life, but the beauty of stories is they don't have to be a reflection of reality or of the modern world. But anyway, I do think Star Wars has to broaden its horizons every so often, especially when the story calls for it or it's appropriate to do so, which I think Andor was the perfect time and place for exactly what it did. Because another thing I love about Andor was how oppressive and brutal the Empire actually, or finally, feels. And that is in large part thanks to the more grounded story that deals with the common folk of the galaxy who don't have force powers and lightsabers to get them out of every single situation, or the type of plot armor we sometimes see in that more classic Star Wars style, where we just know the main characters are going to find a way to thwart the Empire in the end. Basically, we got to intimately know these more normal people of the galaxy. We got these characters, and we see their personal woes and struggles with the Empire, and why they would risk and give everything to fight it. This show helps you understand exactly why the rebellion formed in the first place, as well as the impossible battle that was ahead of them. For me, this honors and enhances the original trilogy because it makes the victory we see there for the rebellion feel all the more impressive and meaningful. And thus I also, again respectfully, I have to disagree with this idea, and you're not even close to the first person to say something like this, but I totally disagree that Andor somehow did not feel like proper Star Wars. Not only do I think it dealt with many of the core themes as well as enhancing other aspects of it, like I just said, but I also think we have to be very, very careful about putting Star Wars, or what it can be, into some sort of box, that it has to fit within these certain parameters to qualify as being real Star Wars. And that's not to say just anything can be Star Wars. I think some things or some types of stories just wouldn't work, or wouldn't work very well. But I mean, part of the reason why we get, say, the Kenobi series we did, or why it was the way it was, is because those creating it, they thought it had to be a certain way or incorporate certain things or elements or aspects. That if there wasn't an explosion or a lightsaber every 5 minutes, if it didn't go all over the galaxy, people wouldn't like it or they'd get bored and turn it off. I've argued many times before that Kenobi should have been a much more slow-paced character introspective than what it was, that it didn't have to leave Tatooine, or that at least Kenobi himself didn't have to leave. You could bring in other characters that were in other parts of the galaxy, But it didn't have to be something where Kenobi was running all over the galaxy trying to do something. All Kenobi felt like all the story seemed to be was a reason or excuse to get Vader and Obi-Wan to fight again. Not something that truly wanted to do something profound with one of the greatest characters in all of Star Wars. But going back to Andor, something else I appreciated about it is that it was Star Wars for adults. And again, it doesn't always have to be that way, nor should it be. It doesn't always have to be written in a way that is geared more towards the adult-only crowd. George Lucas is famous for saying many times over the years that Star Wars is for kids, and we should always remember that. And it should almost always be a franchise that, yes, is inviting to younger audiences. I dare say most of us adults who love it today discovered it when we were young, be that the original trilogy, the prequels, Clone Wars, Rebels, or whatever. But to deny or be oblivious to the fact that Star Wars is a 46-year-old multi-generational franchise that has way more adult fans than younger ones, to not at least sometimes directly cater to the largest demographic is foolish and just bad business. I mean, the irony is, and the comment brings up how few people watched Andor, which is true, but the irony is that some of the people out there who probably would have loved Andor for the type of show it is or was and the pace it had and all of that, well, they probably don't like Star Wars or don't think to watch it because they don't see it as something that can even be on that level, let's say. They only think of it or know it as a kid's franchise or one that always needs to or wants to appeal to younger viewers first and foremost. Basically, there's probably a ton of people out there who would love Andor if they'd only give it a chance, but they won't because it's Star Wars and it's for kids. And of course Star Wars, or Disney and Lucasfilm I should say, they've done themselves no favors lately by just the general decline or oftentimes mediocre quality of the content. I really think they focus too much on short-term profits and not long-term sustainability for the franchise. I don't think they fully understand the ramifications of putting out inferior content for the sake of putting out content and keeping that wheel churning. I don't think they realize that the Star Wars brand does not have the same weight or meaning it once did, that actually the more you put out there, the less special it all becomes, and the harder you have to try or the better it has to be to keep people watching it. I mean, it's one thing to ask people to see a movie every few years, but it's another entirely to ask them to check out multiple series every year and to have to pay for it month by month, especially with the sheer amount of competition out there these days. And finally, I think another reason people didn't watch Andor was simply the name. I mean, very few people outside the fandom are going to remember who Andor is or what that character's name was from Rogue One. This series should have gone with a name like The Dark Times, or maybe something a little less generic than that, but you know what I'm saying here. It should have aimed for a title that really got people's attention, instead of one that makes them ask who or what is an Andor. So yeah, to sum it up here, why I love Andor so much is because it's a more adult-oriented story that's very well written and is far more character-driven than Star Wars usually tends to be. Yet it also deals with some of the most fundamental parts of Star Wars, like the Empire and the Rebellion, and it enhances them. It was refreshing and different, but still felt like Star Wars to me. It's really that simple. Well, that's all I got for you this time. Now it's your turn to take to the comments below and weigh in on this one. Why did you or don't you enjoy Andor? And do you think Star Wars needs to branch out a bit more often and try new things? Or should it just stick to the tried and true? You can also, if you choose, ask a question for a future lightning response video. Just start your comment off with "Hey Thor" and then ask away. Whatever you choose to do though, leave a comment below and let's talk some Star Wars. And until next time, thanks for watching.